AskReddit by Franzi7. Frank Sinatra said, "The best revenge is massive success." What's a real life example of this? Deleted. Used to love watching that show back in '99. George Lucas got the ownership of the toy rights to Star Wars because they don't think it would be successful. He made an absolute killing on those. Not just the toy rights, he got the entire IP in exchange for waiving his salary. Michael J. Fox has a great story about when he started out. Some bigwig at the network didn't like him for the role of Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties. He was too short, not cute, not heartthrob enough. You're never going to see his face on a lunchbox. But the producer cast him anyway and the show shot to #1 and stayed there. Fox sent him a Family Ties lunchbox with his face on it, and then Back to the Future 1, 2, 3 lunchboxes. Sylvester Stallone as well. Casting agents told him he was too stupid looking and he'd only get small roles as the thug who got beaten up. He said he literally went to every casting agent and got rejected by all of them. Even after he wrote Rocky and found producers, they didn't want him to star in it. The guy who invented ring cameras went on Shark Tank and was rejected by everyone. They all thought it would fail. Well, you know the rest. Deleted. Italian industrialist, builder of tractors, made a mint out of it and rewarded himself with a new Ferrari. Ferrari broke down. Needed a new clutch. Wealthy industrialist waited patiently for his new clutch to arrive, and after many weeks it finally showed up. Same clutch he was putting in his tractors, more than twice the price. A little bit annoyed at this, he rang Ferrari to complain. They told him go back to building tractors, leave supercars to us. And Lamborghini was born. Combined with the Ford vs Ferrari story, I think Enzo has been in the business of being a supervillain all along. Ron McNair had the police called on him when he was little because he was black and reading in a library. He grew up to be an astronaut and the library he was kicked out of was later named after him. Fuck yeah. And he has a federal research program for undergrad college students that is named after him. I am a McNair scholar. Shouts out to the Ronald D. McNair Scholar Baccalaureate program. I wouldn't be where I am today without my participation in that program. Brendan Fraser getting the Oscar this year after being blacklisted from Hollywood for over a decade for speaking out about being sexually assaulted. It's a shame all of those actors and actresses who love showing us how great they are didn't offer him any support when he needed it. Jennifer Hudson lost American Idol and became more successful than the winner. She is a recent EGOT winner and the youngest woman to do it. 7th place looks fantastic on her. When Lady Gaga was in college, some of her classmates had a Facebook group called Stephanie Germanotta, You'll Never Be Famous. Pretty sure she proved them wrong. Damn, Facebook is old. Holland Ellison sent every writing award he received to one of his old professors that said he'd never be successful. I met Holland Ellison at a Star Trek convention shortly before he died. I told him that I wrote a fanfic that reimagined City on the Edge of Forever. He said, "Oh yeah? I want to read it." I gave the link to his assistant. I walked by his table later and I could see that they were reading it on an iPad, even though there was a long line for autographs. He looked up, pointed at the iPad and said, "Well done." Erin French, chef owner of restaurant The Lost Kitchen in rural Maine, co-owned a restaurant in the town of Belfast with her husband. A very tumultuous relationship ended with him changing the locks on the building with all of her equipment inside. She licked her wounds, leased space in an old mill building in her tiny hometown of Freedom, and built from the ground one of the best restaurants in the country, with a coveted reservation that is fabled for its difficulty to get a table. Has her own multi-season documentary on TV and is absolutely killing it in the culinary world now. Love her book Finding Freedom. Sony and Nintendo were working on a console together before the N64 came out, intending to utilize Nintendo's gaming hardware combined with Sony's sound tech to create games with more immersive sound capabilities than have been seen before. Partway through development and immediately following Sony's announcement of their partnership, Nintendo backed out of the deal, which, if you're not aware of Japanese business etiquette, is kind of a dick move. Nintendo backed out to work with Philips to put Nintendo games on the CDI, which resulted in the worst received Nintendo games of all time. Sony, out of spite, went on to make the PlayStation, one of the best-selling consoles in gaming history, and cement themselves as a massive player in the console wars to this day. Edited for various corrections. Thanks replies. Also, the original prototype PlayStation, the Nintendo Collab 1, was literally a SNES with a CD player. Blockbuster laughed baby Netflix out of the room with their idea. Then later, grown-up Netflix killed Blockbuster. Best thing for Netflix, really. Blockbuster would have driven themselves and the Netflix rent model out of business through mismanagement. I don't know about you, but I can't live in a world without Voltron, legendary defender. There was a multi-millionaire, like $100 of millions there, from where I am from, that applied for membership at a country club, was turned away because of some random rich country club rule. Anyway, a few years later the country club was wanting to expand its golf course and was going to buy up the neighboring properties. This guy decided to go ahead and outbid the country club and buy up the properties himself. He turned into your generic McMansion suburbia, but still. That's the sort of passive-aggressive fuck you money I one day hope to have. Reminds me of President Eisenhower. Before he was president, he tried to join Denver Country Club and they rejected him. Then, you know, he won WWII in the presidency. When Denver CC offered him an honorary membership, he rejected them and joined the, at the time, less prestigious one down on the other side of the rich people tracks. My mom. She, like the rest of her family, were all dirt poor. For them, it was traditional that they wouldn't go to college and would instead focus on finding a decent at best job as quickly as possible while also getting married and starting families young. My mom was different. She decided instead to go to college, and while she did drink on occasion, she stayed clear of the drugs that had ruined so many of her cousins' lives. She told me that her entire family looked down on her and said that she was wasting her time. Well, now she is currently the only one who owns a house and has a stable, well-paying career. My generation of cousins saw her success and are now following in her footsteps. The power of a positive role model cannot be underestimated, but someone has to go out there and do it first. Props to your mother. The TV networks who turned down showing Breaking Bad on their networks. AMC picked it up and never looked back. You're goddamn right. Lucille Ball auditioned for the part of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. After getting rejected by the studio producer, she met Desi Arnaz and became one of the most influential stars in the world. The Revenge. She founded her company Desilu and set up shop in the same office the producer rejected her in. We owe what is arguably the most influential TV series in history, Star Trek, to her. Julie Andrews was very popular as Eliza Doolittle in the stage version of My Fair Lady. However, when the film version was being developed, the head of Warner Brothers Studios, Jack Warner, decided that she wasn't well known enough. They wanted a big name star in the role, so Audrey Hepburn was cast instead, despite needing her singing to be dubbed over. With the role no longer available, Andrews was instead took on the role of the titular character in Mary Poppins. The film was a huge critical and commercial success, and earned Andrews both a Golden Globe and an Academy Award for her performance as the magical ninny. In her Golden Globe acceptance speech, Andrews referenced her snub for My Fair Lady, saying, "My thanks to a man who made a wonderful movie and who made all this possible in the first place, Mr. Jack Warner." Additional fun story. Apparently Julie Andrews was in the hospital recovering from giving birth when Disney was like, hey, we want you to be in this movie. Andrews says, well, I'd like to accept, but I just had a baby. Disney says that's okay. We'll wait for you. David Tepper, after being passed on for partner multiple times at Goldman Sachs, decided to go work for himself. A few decades later he bought his ex-boss's house, John Cassini, in the Hamptons for $43 million. He then proceeded to demolish the thing and put up an even more expensive mansion. And all his ex-boss has to show for it is $43 million. Groups of guitars are on the way out, a recording executive at Decca told the Beatles in 1962. We don't like their sound. Groups of guitars are on the way out. Well, thinking about it now, they predicted the new wave keyboard period 15 years in advance. One of my best friends in college was unpopular. The guys on my floor thought he was a dork and dismissed him. 5 years after graduating he joined a .com as employee number 3. As the company grew he hired his friends, me included. 10 years after graduation he retired on his .com wealth. I love reconnecting with people from college and letting them know that I'll be retired at 35. The subtext is that if they'd been nicer to him they could have made millions. My ex was going to divorce me after I retired to try and get a percentage of my retirement pay. Evidently this had been a plan for a while. Her best friend sent me screenshots of her plan and I used it for my divorce. She got nothing. I'm happily married to my best friend. Financially stable, with all the free time I could want. Edit, a word. Is your best friend her ex-best friend? The one that sent you the screenshots? In the 1960s, Ford wanted to buy Ferrari. Just before they closed the deal, Ferrari slammed the door on them and let themselves be bought by Fiat. Ford, then, designed an entirely new supercar, beat Ferrari at the 24 Hours of Le Mans from 1966 to 1969, and Ferrari hasn't won that race since against any other car manufacturer. And for the icing on the cake, 50 years later, Ford entered again after not competing since the 70s, and won again. Good movie too. Tina Turner. She got away from an abusive husband with virtually no assets and went on to become a solo superstar. My wife is always talking shit about how good she is at Candyland. When our daughter was old enough to play we bought the game and I won 4 games in a row. I've never done meth but I imagine that is what that rush feels like. That game has no strategy whatsoever, aside from how you shuffle the cards. Moved out of my abusive mother's and stepdad house at 18. Had my own apartment at 18. Bought my own house at 21. They kept telling everyone I was a drug addict. The drug, success. I worked as CFO for a private company, and after 5 years of poor ownership and family meddling I was let go with no notice or severance, while they owed me tens of thousands of dollars in back pay, expenses, revenue share etc. I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I won my lawsuit and have a judgment against him and his company which I know I will never collect on. 7 years later I started my own company in the same competitive space. Following his most recent divorce he's about $2.7 million in debt. My company was just valued at $100 million as we move into our 4th year. Super happy for you. This is a huge dub. The corporate space is full of gatekeepers and shitty personalities. Seems like you're doing things right. Guy in my class in middle school was always sleeping from staying up late playing Halo 2. He was really good, like travel to tournaments and win them on weekends good. The teacher said enjoy your video games now because you'll be flipping burgers for life. He bought himself and his parents' houses at 19 from YouTube streaming money. You happen to know his YouTube name? Working on the Shrek movie was a massive punishment as executives didn't believe in it and would Shrek underperforming animators. It's worth pointing out that it was in comparison to Prince of Egypt. They were expecting Prince of Egypt to be a big movie that needed everyone working at their hardest and best. They didn't want it to fail, so if they didn't think you could handle Poe, then they sent you to Shrek. Freaks and Geeks got cancelled by NBC. Judd Apatow then made it his mission to make every single teen actor on the show a massive star both in front of and behind the camera.